Hi everyone, it's Daisy, and my project today is on a polar bear. And this is one of those rare, amazing sightings where you go to the aquarium and you hope that the bear or the whale will swim right up to you. Well, in this case, the polar bear did, and it was a photograph I saw, and I had to capture it in watercolors. So my rendering is in watercolors. I hope to take you through the process, and I'll be applying masking using frisket to create the splattering all around the bear. But just go through this project with me, see how you enjoy it. This is a picture of a boy and a polar bear. And I just came across it on the net, and it looked so breathtaking that I felt like I wanted to just try to paint it. And so I decided to just let it record as I painted it. But it is the one of those kind of pictures that inspires you. So let's get going with it. And first things first, the sketch. So what I like to do a lot of times is just kind of create the boundaries. So here is the placement of the first foot, the tip of the polar bear's nose, and it angles up like this. So this is the curve for the polar bear's hand. That's his nose line, that's his face, the eye going up like that. And then right next to it, on above, or rather in line with the eye level, is his other paw right over here. So before I do any kind of a major drawing, I like to plug in my dominant lines. So changing my pencil as that one is giving me issues for B. It's 2B. This will work. Next thing, after we do this, a polar bear's snout is sort of and based on this chisel that I have in the face here, his eye is right over here. Based on that, my other eye is kind of right over here. And these are all, I draw them all as very basic, like small components of my lines, just like that, placing them around, down, side of his face, building into his fur right there. And then going over his head right there. So whatever the size of the face is here, that's how high the head would be. So it would be about right from here and then from his eye you see a muscle structure right here, the area under the bear's eye right there, moving into his fur right here, and diagonally across from it, this is where I see the base of his ear. And the ear does not get to go past the body line. So that's another thing that I keep in mind. This paw particularly, it comes in contact briefly with the face itself. And the basic joint to where the polar bear bends his foot is right here as a triangular piece, whilst the other one up top here is more of a semicircle. You extend the semicircle over a little bit more, and you want to bring down the line right there. Here, first ear we drew right there, The second ear goes across, and it's again a very brief line. It comes back to the body. So this is a basic gist of the bear right there. Above, back of his body right here comes very close to the ear, and it circulates around his paw to kind of finish off right there. The bear is of course swimming underwater, and so the whole perception of this composition is from an underwater angle. He's there, and let's have a look at the other part of his thing right here. So what you are seeing over here, now let's put in the claws so that it gives you better clarity of what we're seeing here. We're seeing the claws, which is nothing but curved lines. Because I'm going to do this picture in a watercolor format, I don't want my lines to be overly strong. So I'm going to keep them very, very subdued. These are my 3 claws that I can prominently see on his hand over here, so that's what I'm going to draw. This helps us to understand the angle. Otherwise the triangle just looks like a triangle, nothing more than that. Moving back to the opposite side, I would like to take away any line that is overly strong, because polar bears are white. I am doing a watercolor picture, and it's not going to be to my advantage to have such dark lines. So first claw that you can see very clearly is what you would end up drawing. The claw is on top of the fur, does not go past the hand line. Second one is over here. Third one is here. And the fourth one is here, right there. And above this, what you will see is the line pulls back, and it creates like the actual fingers of the bears. Right there. Now what about his arm? It tucks in, comes out, and angles towards the body. All we see of it is right here, and then we don't see much here. This is a lot of darkness for the water and whatnot. Now the boy's head, this is the tip of his hand. His head kind of angles right here, directly under your polar bear's nose. Curve to the top, tapers off to the bottom, sort of like a teardrop. You place his ears by using straight lines. Try not to draw them right away, and you are going to then add them in. Take away any extra lines from inside of this, and we are going to put in his jacket. Remember, the size that you make of the boy's body makes you know that it's a child versus an adult. So you have to maintain smaller frames if you want it to be more childlike than anything else. I want to drop the ears down a bit more than where I have them, say about here maybe. So I'm not happy with what I've got right now. Going to taper that. All these corrections is what you would end up doing prior to touching any color. This feels a little bit better to me versus my first positioning. So just a prelim sketch from my side. And I don't see the outsides of his jacket that much, so I'm going to erase away whatever I have on the outside. Now, As far as the nose goes, it's going to be a little bit on the inside. Smiley face. Right there, that's everything. Drawing's done. This is all I want to draw. And what I would like to do next is I would like to take off a lot of these lines. So I'm going to try to erase them down without having you all lose the perception of them. So I don't want you to feel like you can't see the lines anymore where possible. So I'm going to fade them down to where I can use them in my art, and I don't have to kind of feel like it's too much. I wish I didn't have that line, and I do feel that way sometimes when I forget to kind of erase off. So next thing, I'm going to bring in what we call frisket, and we're going to be using that as there are a ton of bubbles that are kind of all around the bear. Frisket is basically this. This is frisket. This one's called misket, but still, it's about the same thing. And what it does is it provides you with like a little blocking of some sort. So I'm going to remember one thing. If you ever use a brush to the frisket, that brush is going to have to be discarded at the end of usage, because this stuff doesn't come off of brushes. The bristles are totally choked. And so if you use it, you have to be very, very, very careful how you kind of allow it to saturate around you. So what we have over here is I took some of my frisket, and what I want to be able to do is this thing peels right off. You might have just seen me peel off a slight splash. There we go. So I want to, I'm going to fast forward this part, but what I'm essentially doing is I'm kind of putting in a whole bunch of these tiny little dots. The reason for doing the frisket is because once you put the watercolor on, you will never get back the original white of your paper without anything else blocking it. And because of that, you want to do all this coverage before you get to anything else. Now, when I started this drawing and I wanted to do this project, I ended up realizing that I didn't need to do that much of the background space as per the original picture that I saw. There was a large mass of water on top of the polar bear's back, and I don't need to worry about that because I didn't leave enough room. So remember, this frisket is mainly to be used if you want to block off a certain amount of area. You don't want the watercolor to saturate on a certain level. That's when you use it. Okay, now the color, because the polar bear is predominantly white with patches of different colors, so I'm going to bring in a few tones. So I'm going to add my lightest brown. This is the brown. Even if your browns in the watercolor tubes dry up, you can still use them. You don't have to discard them totally. Going to put my Payne's gray here. I haven't put a black yet. My black is going to be my very last thing if I need to use it at all. Going to go ahead and put in my blue. here because the blue is my base water around, but it also gives a few very pale hues on the polar bear's body. So I want to get that. I need my brown, I need this, I needed a skin color for the boy's ears, but I think I'll get to that later on. So now, just to kind of bring it together for the viewers here, what we're going to do is we're going to take our blue and really mellow it down. A little bit goes a very long way, especially in watercolors. So you start by putting a dominant dot at one point and then take some water and spread it around. And then you can add more as you go. So I'm not going to go to the edges of my paper. I don't need to do that. And I want a rough kind of a line around my polar bear's body. I don't want it to be a sharp kind of a thing. I want some darkness every now and then in different parts of the water. So I'm going to intentionally put in the darks here. Okay, and as I come closer to my bear's body, going to clean off my brush, no paint on this, and slowly bring in a lighter tone in towards the middle. Remember to make sure you stroke into the bear's body like so that it feels like the fur is kind of shooting past everything. Bring in some light, as you can see over here, and darkness to this side. But again, clean off my brush, and I'm going to go for a light kind of a pale hue into my bear's body now. Remember, an animal such as a polar bear with so much white around its body will pick on the reflections of color from all around. You want a contrast. You don't want one solid color going in at any given point. So yeah. You want to create a little bit of this blue effect in most areas, but there's going to be other colors that kick in as well. So some on the bear's head right over here, a little bit onto the left side of his head right over here. A little bit more prominently around and over the eye right there. The thing about watercolors is that they stay alive for a very long time. What that means is that you can manipulate them a little bit later on as well. You can still put a wet brush on them and move them around, which you can't do with acrylics. So you have to pick the colors that you want specifically based on how they perform. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish the area around the polar bear of the blues, and then I'm going to bring in a gray, the Payne's gray. I want this to be a darker area, specifically down here at the bottom. Don't want this to be lighter. Lighter towards closer to the body of the bear. And there we go. And going to make it even darker still down here. Almost feels like the photograph, I mean, you could even interpret this photograph as if the bear came to the boy in a dream. It kind of, I mean, your imagination can kind of go wild on this one. Really a beautiful picture. Kudos to the photographer that took it. So cool. The frisket dots are holding steady. They're not going to allow the colors to come under it, so we've got a very strong hold on it. A little bottle goes a really long way. It's worth the investment. So if you ever need to kind of think about how to take up your watercolors to the next level, well, I will ask you to consider picking up certain tools that really help you. Notice that I'm leaving some deliberate white on the side of the bear's arm, and that's intentional. And a lighter tone right under the mouth area over here. And into the pocket here. So I need a little bit of my blues right here that frame the face of my bear. So I'm going to intentionally put my darkest tones closest to the outline of his face, over here as well, and here. Don't have to try to wiggle your way around his claws. Claws will be painted in black later on, so you're okay to kind of now comes my gray. So the gray is something that I want to bring in from the bottom more than anything else. So I'm going to add that over the blue And I'm going to let it kind of merge in with the blues. I'm letting the water do the work for me. And that, my friends, is my rendering in watercolor of this photograph. Hope you enjoyed it. One last step, going to remove the frisket now. So remember the dots that we had put on. So it's as simple as just taking your finger and rubbing them off. Okay, hold steady now. So you get this brilliant effect of these little speckles of water drops everywhere. And that white paper is just so beautifully white under the frisket's effect that you never have to feel like, will it come out or not? It definitely comes out. I've used the frisket, or rather misket in this case, a lot of times, and it has never let me down yet. So having said that, if your paper is wet, like over here, I have a small patch that I just recently did, so I can hold off to take care of them as soon as I've got everything dried up, and that should work just fine. Another good practice on a watercolor that you spend a ton of time on is to make sure that when you have to kind of move some stuff off of it just to clean it off, that you just kind of use something called a mop brush. A mop brush is something that's just like a blusher brush. Maybe you have one of those that you don't use in the house, or sister or mother, someone has it, and you can just keep it in your arsenal of brushes, and that would work too. So you just avoid kind of suddenly putting a smear on somewhere that you didn't need. There we go now. Thank you for watching.